Welcome to The Artist Matters. I'm Alex Rudy, and each week you will meet incredible artists from all walks of life. Filmmakers, writers, actors, painters, musicians, and so many more, sharing their stories to motivate and inspire the creative in you. Whether you're doing it for fun or looking to make a living, this show will help you on your journey to bring out the artist within and letting the world know that your art matters. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Artist Matters podcast. I'm your host, Alex Rudy, and you are now in for part 2 of my interview with Laurie Durrett. Hope you enjoyed part 1. She has a lot to talk about. It's a very long journey, an incredible resume she has. And you'll hear more about that resume with some highlights, including her trip to Ireland, where she went to a Belfast prison and was able to do plays with prisoners there. Yes, theatrical plays with prisoners. And her time being there in the countries was remarkable stories. And they performed a show called My Home. And she gets into a project called Be Not Afraid, which is a really wild story of, this is something I had no idea about, that there's businesses that move into African nations and they ask the witch doctors. There are lots of witch doctors, believe it or not. And they ask them to help bless or cast spells or whatever the heck it is they do to their businesses and to give them luck. Well, in order to do that, the witch doctors tell them they need to sacrifice a child to do that. And these businesses will go along with that. Unreal. And thankfully, there's a man named Bob Goff who helps these children out that do survive and get away from these witch doctors. And Laurie wanted to make a movie centering around these children and their stories and the mission to put an end to this insanity and help these children lead a better life afterwards. And Laurie also goes on to talk about a project that she did with her daughter, a short film called Caroline. It's a very interesting story. And they did the film festival circuit too and made it all the way to Cannes. Yes, they actually made it to the Cannes Film Festival. You'll hear her talk about that and what it's like working with her daughter. And if you remember in part 1, her father wasn't super supportive of her being in the arts. So now as a parent herself, she was faced with a similar situation of her daughter wanting to get into an artistic career, but having been in the arts for so long, working in the field, she knew how to help guide and encourage her daughter along, which is fantastic. So we all hope to strive for. And of course, there's a lot more. You've waited long enough. So here we go with part 2 of my interview with Laurie Durrett. All right. Next highlight. It's going to Ireland, of all places, to do My Home. How did that come about?
After teaching on the high school level, I really wanted to teach on the collegiate level. I said, if I'm going to teach theater or be in the arts, I really want to reach young adults. I loved high school, but a lot of kids, especially in Texas, a lot of times you would get kids in class that, they were there because they didn't have anywhere else to go. And some of them I grabbed, some I got them involved, and some were just like, just get me out of here. So I wanted to teach on the collegiate level. So I decided to go get my master's. And I was very fortunate to get a scholarship to NYU.
Right.
I was already in my 40s, and I think, they feel sorry for people in their 40s wanting to go back to school. So let me give you all this money.
Jeez, I should go there now.
Yeah, there you go.
Probably get in like this.
So So it was great. I was teaching in the high school level, and I really wanted to take it a step up. And they had a wonderful program. So I ended up going, and during the summer months, they would go to Ireland. And why they chose Ireland, I have no idea. We went to Trinity College, which was in Dublin, and the greatest, probably one of the most incredible moments of my life was working in this program. We ended up going to Belfast into the prison, the Belfast prison. Now there were a group of us. I think we had about 10 in our group. All of us were teachers. All of us were educators. Most of us, probably 3/4 of us, were professional actors, but we also did educating on the side. So they allowed us in the prison system in Belfast, and these were not, I'm in there because I took pot or something like that. These were hardened criminals. These were murderers and rapists. But the coolest thing that they had done in this prison, first off, we were the only Americans ever allowed in this prison in Belfast. But what they had done, a gentleman who was a playwright was in the prison, and he had taken Macbeth, and he had turned it into Mickey B. and the Shawshank, and he just rewrote Macbeth to fit into the prison system. Wow. So we went in there and met all of the guys within the theater system they created in this prison. And I got to work with, me and one other guy got to work with the guy who played Macbeth. And we got to talk with him and find out, how he came up with the character, how he created, the whole thing, how he more or less broke the structure of the play down, how he broke his character down. And one of the really cool things about prisoners, especially when they're doing something in the arts, probably some of the most incredible performances I've ever seen have been with the men in prisons. But what it is they have nothing to lose. Nothing. They're there for the rest of their lives. The majority of them are. So they give it everything they have. So their performances are just breathtaking. And when he did they kept those soliloquies in there, and when he did those, you could have heard a feather drop. It was so beautiful and so eloquent, and he told it with such passion. It was just incredible. It was an incredible experience. And this gentleman had actually, the IRA is still very big in Belfast. In fact, on a Sunday afternoon, we went to the prison, and we were walking down the street one afternoon. All of us were walking down the street, and we had a guy was showing us around. And he said, as we were walking down the street, you could look down the streets, and one street would have flags full of the British flag. It would be the British flag flying. Then the next street would have, Ireland's flag flying. And he said, these are two opposing streets. They don't have the same beliefs, because the IRA was still very prevalent in Belfast. And he said, and they turned, and he said, now this is Sunday afternoon. He said, you see those buildings over there? And he pointed up to the right-hand side, and there were some buildings, and on top of them were these brown shuttered doors. And he said, now, every Sunday afternoon, they have a parade that comes downtown of a band. And what happens if the band ever plays a song they're not supposed to play, he says those shutter doors will open, and guns will come out of those shutter doors, and they will shoot the band members. And he was as serious as a heart attack. And I remember all of us were like, so are we going to be here when the band comes down the street? And we were all just like, you're joking, right? And he goes, oh, no, I'm dead serious. He said they will kill anyone who plays the wrong music, doesn't play the correct music. So it was my degree, my master's is in theater education and human development. And what that meant was we would go to airport hangars that they had turned into a theater. They would have a makeshift stage, and people would get up on stage with playwrights who would write these plays that were like either for the IRA or against the IRA, or they would talk about political issues that were going on there in town. And they knew at any moment, if the wrong person saw those plays, they would be killed. They would be murdered. I mean, that's how important and that's how passionate they were about the arts, that they actually knew they could lose their life if they said the wrong thing. And the day the guy told me that, I didn't even know how to think. I was like, to be so impassioned and to have a message to tell people, knowing that you could lose your life at any moment, that blew my mind. And the guy that played Macbeth in the prison, he was so cute. He was such a sweet man, very sweet man. All of his family members had been killed by the IRA. So what he did in retaliation, he killed the men who killed his family. So he was put in prison for life. He didn't get the death sentence. He was just in there for life. But so those are the situations, those guys dealt with every single day. And I even remember when we came from the prison that day, the playwright who wrote Mickey B, we went by his apartment. He was out on the weekends on furlough. He had to stay, that was funny. He had to stay in prison during the weekdays, but on the weekend, they actually let him go to his apartment. And it was a horrible thing that happened. Well, I'll kind of get into that in a minute. But anyway, Home actually came from the prisoners. It was one of their plays they had written. And we got to choose one of their plays that we wanted to direct and to perform for the people in Dublin. So Home was the one that I chose. And it basically was a session of monologues from the people all over Ireland and what they had gone through. Some were IRA members, some were family members, and they all told their own individual stories. So I directed that show, and that was kind of like our graduating piece at the end of the summer. And so that's where Home came from. But something I had decided when we got back to New York after the summer was over, I wrote up a proposal to do 2 shows. I wanted the guys in the prison system to do Mickey B in Ireland, and at the same time in New York, we would be televising their show going on live on their stage in the prison. And then in New York, we would be televising the real Macbeth, and we were going to try to intertwine the stories in a live production. And so I wrote up a proposal to do that, and I took it to the department heads, and they all loved it. They thought it was great. So we started the preparation for it, and we're setting up dates when to do it, casting people in New York. They already had the guys, obviously, in Ireland. And we were about a month into production, and we got a message one day from the prison. What do they call the head guy in the prison?
Warden.
Warden. Thank you. We got it was an email from the warden of the prison, and he said, we will no longer be doing Mickey B in the Shawshank. He said, we have actually ended the program because the playwright, when he went home that weekend, his apartment was blown up and he was killed instantly. So he said, we will no longer do the theater program in the prison system. And it absolutely tore my heart apart because that was the one thing that these guys got up for every day. That was the one thing that made, living in this environment bearable for them. And it just absolutely devastated me. So we didn't get to do it, but my experience there was just incredible. We actually did a show on top of a mountain, one of the Ireland mountains, performed a show which was unbelievable, and it was a life-changing event. So